Berkshire District Attorney Andrea Harrington is joining us for this episode of iBerkshire's TV. Welcome, DA. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
So you are rounding up your first year.
Yes, it's hard to believe.
Yeah. So, I mean, it must have been a very interesting year. Obviously, there's been a lot going on on your platform and some of the things that you were talking about. And so we thought we could catch up with you and find out how things are working out for you.
We've had a great year. I'm very proud of the team that we've built in the District Attorney's Office, and I'm very proud of our many, many accomplishments. I think that people are starting to have a better understanding of what I meant during my campaign when I promised to focus our attention on investigating and prosecuting violent crime and looking for a solutions-oriented approach to people who have mental health challenges and substance use disorder. And I think people are seeing that in action, and we're seeing results, and that we've built a lot of trust in the community.
Yeah, I've noticed in comparison to other DAs that you seem to be very much more out in the community. You're talking to a lot of people. You're going to groups. What is kind of the feedback that you've been getting from some of these gatherings you've been at?
Well, people in our community really care about the issues that we are grappling with in the courts and want to be a part of the solution. And the feedback that we're getting is, I think people are understanding that we are going to be tough and aggressive with people that are violent, but people are also starting to understand that it is the role of the DA to work with the community on important issues of public safety and addressing mental health issues and domestic violence and substance use disorder is a really important component of public safety.
So over the last year, what is a particular initiative or change in policy out of your office that you think has been working well?
One of our great successes is the creation of our Domestic Sexual Violence Task Force. This is an unprecedented community-wide engagement effort that engages everybody from law enforcement to advocates at the Elizabeth Freeman Center. We have people from the hospitals, people from the schools participating in our task force. And we've made a lot of changes in our office in terms of how we address gender-based violence, and we're also working very closely with law enforcement and collaborating so that our response is more effective. But the thing that I really like about this project is that it's giving us an opportunity to look at how we're going to distinguish with domestic violence the same way we distinguish with other crimes. Who's dangerous, who needs to be removed from the community so that people don't get hurt, and who needs help so that they can be a productive member of their families and our community and give people the tools that they need to be successful. And that's a very sophisticated and I think nuanced way of approaching gender-based violence.
There was a recent case in New York. New York is trying to follow through some of the similar criminal justice reforms, and there was if I remember correctly, somebody who got off with no cash bail, but they didn't do a dangerousness hearing, and he ended up killing someone after that. So I know a lot of people have been following some of the news over in Albany. So how is your process different in who you're going after for violence and who you're leaning off on for the no cash bail options?
In Massachusetts, we have something called the dangerousness statute that authorizes my office to request a judge to hold somebody pre-trial if there are indications that they are a danger to the community and that there are no terms of release that could ensure public safety or the safety of the individuals. And my office has worked very closely with law enforcement in terms of gathering the information that we need so that we can present that information to the judge, and we have been very successful in terms of having people held who are dangerous. And this is critical to any kind of criminal justice reform. When we talk about lowering incarceration rates, people are very focused on who's being held pre-trial. And there's a lot of people across this country being held pretrial. It's devastating for people, and there's a lot of problems with it. But in order for reform to be successful, people have to feel safe. And in New York, what you're seeing is because of the way their law works, people don't feel safe, and they are not safe. But in Massachusetts, we do have this statute. We work with it every day in the courts, and it's really, really critical. And I've been proud of the work that we've done around working with law enforcement and making good arguments to the courts, and being reasonable, and working with defense counsel in coming up with conditions of release to ensure people's safety.
I know we don't cover court a lot from Berkshires, but I've certainly been in a couple of court cases, and the way you hear about them isn't necessarily the way it played out in court. And there are people who simply don't know how to express themselves in ways that aren't necessarily violent or is not with drug abuse. And I always feel bad for these people.
Yeah.
I had an editor who said we shouldn't be making fun of people like that because just sometimes people do stupid things. And I think the idea had been with sort of stepping back a little bit on holding people is that not necessarily everybody's dangerous because of this one time they use poor judgment.
Yeah, no, that is the difficult part of the job of a prosecutor is how do we make good decisions to distinguish somebody who is dangerous from somebody who made a poor decision. And the way that we've been working through that is by collaborating with our officers, who are the people who are on the ground, by getting good information from victims, because sometimes victims are afraid to cooperate. There's a lot of things going on there, so really working on building that relationship and getting the information that we need. There's a new project that my office is going to be working on with the help of the Massachusetts Commission on Probation. So in some communities, they have danger assessment tools, and it's an assessment that can be used across the system, and it's like an algorithmic kind of assessment. And and those can be abused for sure, and they can end up having very biased outcomes. So you need to be careful about what it is that they're assessing and how it is that you're using it. But we do see this as a critical piece in just informing our decision-making process around that very difficult issue as to who's dangerous and who needs help and just made a mistake.
It's interesting. So touching on a couple of other things, I know that you started out, your year started out rough. There were 2 devastating fires. There were people. Was that difficult for you, that first time out having to deal with a situation like that?
It wasn't nearly as difficult for me as it was for our first responders. And I have a whole new level of respect for our first responders, who are the first people on the scene and going into the houses. And that is, there's something called secondary trauma. And, I was really impressed with how the state police handled that. They did a critical incident debrief. The local law enforcement also did a debrief to help people process that trauma, because being exposed to that repeatedly can really start to change people's emotional makeup. And certainly, with working with the victims in those cases and seeing, their pain it's tough. It's tough to see. I felt privileged that our community entrusted me with this responsibility of ensuring that, those investigations were carried out properly. And I was, when I was there at those scenes, I felt that I was the conscience of our community, and that in a way we are going to be speaking for the victims in the Sheffield crime in particular, because they cannot speak for themselves.
Okay. And to bring up sort of ending your first year, there was a bit of a controversy last week when you lost one of your employees who basically called you out and said your office was too political and you were not following through on a public records request. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, that particular flashpoint, I guess I'll call it, that arose between myself and my former employee was around a public records request that she wanted to provide emails from the Massachusetts State Police. The request requested emails from my office to Simon's Rock. She wanted to provide Mass State Police emails. There was some disagreement among senior staff as to if that was appropriate for us to be providing emails from a different agency that were not actually requested. There was some discussion about that. There was some back and forth. We actually turned over the documents that were in question. And, this issue really has to go to, it's an employment issue, it's a personnel issue. Right. And, my office, I've been very proud in doing the work of the district attorneys, and we've really worked to try to make things not political. Like, I don't accept campaign contributions from my employees. They're not expected to come to campaign events. We've responded to a lot of public records requests over the past year. I've never had a complaint whatsoever. That's a baseless accusation, and it really comes from a disgruntled former employee. Okay.
And you said you've been in contact with the Secretary of State for an opinion on how it was going, how you handled it? Yeah. We
immediately self-reported to the Secretary of State. We wanted to make them aware of these allegations, and we will be following through with any process that they deem necessary. But it's kind of a non-issue, really.
Okay, so first I want to thank you for being with us today, and I hope you come back and we can talk more about some of the things that are going on in your office.
There's a lot to talk about, so I look forward to coming back.